idolaters, and there were pagans that were over there. And so God Almighty tells Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, the land that they're going to go into, of Eretz Israel, that they're preparing to go into, is so sacred, is so special, is so holy. There's such a kiddusha, like the word kiddush, we say Friday night, such a holiness that there's an obligation they have, and that is to destroy any idols that they find over there. And the reason that we have, it's like, wait a minute, if you talk about modern Israel today versus all of its neighbors only let you do pretty much their religion in their countries. But the Jewish people, if you're a Muslim, they let you have a mosque in Israel. If you're Christian, they let you have a Christian church. And if whatever you do, if you're a Samaritan, whatever your religion is, if you're a Baha'i, they have a big Baha'i center in Haifa. Israel's very open to this. But in this day, God is saying the land itself is so holy that if there's any type of avodah zarah, any type of idolatry, it has to be destroyed. And it's not to hurt people or to do anything. It's because the land itself has such a holiness. It has such kiddusha. Next, we're warned in the Parsha about false prophets and those who entice other people to serve the false prophets. If you look at, if you have a Chumash in front of you, look at chapter 14, verse 1, you're going to see something amazing. Because remember, this is God talking to us. And in chapter 14, verse 1, there's Chumashim up here if you still need it. I'll tell you what it says. It says in English, I don't know what it is, I don't have one open, but Banim Atem Lashem Elokechem. You are considered children of God. You are considered children of God. And he's specifically speaking to the children of Israel over here because he gives them obligations to fulfill. So this brings up the idea of being the chosen people. Everyone says, oh, you think you're better because you're part of the chosen people. But the chosen people doesn't mean that we're better. It doesn't mean that at all. Anyone know what the whole concept of the Jewish people being the chosen people, what it really means? That's the next thing he says in verse 2, in 14 verse 2. Look over there. But that's treasure is part of it. Also because the Avot were amazing part of it. But the whole idea of this Segula, of this treasure, of this being children of God, of being chosen by God, is not that you're chosen because you're special. You know, it's not like the teacher that says, okay, you're the teacher's pet. You know, you'll bring me a cup of coffee and you get the extra this and extra that, and you can turn in your homework late because you're the teacher's pet. That's not what chosen means. Chosen means that you are chosen to be obligated. That means that you're chosen by God to be obligated to do these mitzvot. The other people that were living in Eretz Israel were not chosen by God to do any of those mitzvot. It turns out that they're all obligated in 7 basic mitzvot, but they didn't know that. And there were idolaters that were living there. And then in the second verse in chapter 14, that's where God calls the Bnei Israel a treasured people. Ki am kadosh ata Hashem Elokecha. You are a holy nation to Almighty God. Uvecha bachar Hashem liyot le'am segula. And God chose you to be that segula. God chose you to be that treasured people from all mikol ha'amim, from all the other nations, asher al pnei ha'adamah, so that are on the face of the earth. Also, as the Torah continues, I want to just give you an overview. We are also told what foods may be and may be not eaten. Now, today, they're adding a lot of foods to this list that are not in the Torah. What am I talking about? There are certain animals we're allowed to eat, and certain animals we're not allowed to eat. Certain fish we're allowed to eat. You've probably learned about that. And other fish you cannot eat, and other sea creatures you cannot eat. But today, if you study all the different websites from the kashrut agencies, they're telling you should be careful of this vegetable because bugs are almost impossible to get rid of. Be careful of this vegetable, that vegetable. And it seems like we're the first generation that is making brand new things forbidden. So what we need to do is we really need to analyze, and we really need to find out how to, can't just, because something looks kosher, you can't assume it. It might have an infestation in your local area, and you have to be aware of that. There's a huge problem with a lot of vegetation with bugs. I'm not going to go into it. There's ways to clean it. There's ways to check it. And that's something that you should all become very familiar with, especially not only if you're cooking for yourself, but if you're ever inviting other people to your home, they're relying on you and your standards of kosher. So it's up to you to know not only what to buy, where to buy, that it's kosher, that it's supervised, but even vegetables that you buy right outside. Some of them need to be checked for bugs, and some of them need to be checked to make sure that they're clean. Okay, so now Torah tells us what kind of foods we can have and what kind of foods we can't have. And the next thing that happens in the Parsha, there's a law called Ma'aser Sheni. What's the word Ma'aser? Anyone ever hear this word? Sheni. What is Sheni? A second. So there's a tithe. We have to tithe. We have to give tzedakah. But there's something called Ma'aser Sheni, a second tithe that we have to give. And this was a law that all Jews had to take 1/10 of their produce to be eaten in Jerusalem. This is Ma'aser Sheni. There's going to be another Ma'aser Ani. I'll talk about that in a minute, but we're talking about Ma'aser Sheni, the second tithe. You do your normal first tithe, and you do all your charity, and on top of that, 1/10 of whatever you grow. You're a farmer, right? You got stuff growing in the fields. You must take this, and you must take it to Jerusalem and eat it there. You're eating it. Take it to Jerusalem. Make a party. Have a, and eat it over there and enjoy it. Some practical problems with this. Well, what happens if you live far away from Jerusalem? You live down in the south of Israel. You live up in the north. You live in Syria, in Lebanon. Some of that land actually used to be part of Israel. But even if you lived outside of Israel, what do you do? So they have a rule, and that if you had too much produce to carry and take to Jerusalem, or because you lived too far, or it was too difficult, what you would do is sell it, and then take the money, go to Jerusalem, and buy other fruits and vegetables there, and eat those when you arrive in Jerusalem. That's the concept of Ma'aser Sheni. Okay, what was the other concept I told you about? Ma'aser Ani. Ma'aser Ani means, besides taking your tithe, besides giving tzedakah on a regular basis, there's like a tax. And again, we're farmers, we're growing agriculture, and the idea is that we have a cycle of the agricultural cycle. It's a 7-year cycle. We're going to Shemitah. We're going to learn about that, or hopefully you've learned about that already. Shemitah. It's there's a 7-year cycle. So every third year of the 7-year cycle, everyone must set aside 1/10 of their produce, and that goes exclusively to the poor. Okay. So besides whatever else you're giving, the third year is when you have to do every third year. So the third year, the 6th year, and then you have the Shemitah year itself, right? Where all the land lies fallow and everything becomes ownerless. That's the 7th. So of the 7-year cycles, year 3 and 6, you're obligated in Ma'aser Ani, and the Ma'aser that goes to the poor people.
Does it then reset?
After the 7th year, it starts again. It goes back to 1. It goes back to 1. And then when you have 7 cycles of 7 cycles of 7-year, you have 49 years. What comes next?
50.
Yovel, the Jubilee year. That's proclaim liberty through the land. This is what it's talking about. Okay, so hang on to this. The Torah goes on to teach about the Shemitah year. The Shemitah year is the 7th year. Every 7th year is a Shemitah year. Now, we're not living in Israel. We're not really counting these things so well all the time, but we do know when the Shemitah year comes. Now, there's some rules about the Shemitah year that I don't know if everyone knows about that. one of the greatest forms of charity that you can do is to give someone a loan. Did you know it? So, well, you're getting your money back. He's good for it. He's got co-signers. He's got property. He has collateral. Giving a loan is a tremendously high level, if not one of the highest levels of tzedakah, of charity possible. So now you come to me, and I'm a rich guy, and you say, hey, can I borrow $100? And I say, sure, no problem. I lend you the $100. We write a contract. You owe me $100. Can I charge interest? No, Jews cannot charge interest to other Jews. Okay, can't do it. So you owe me $100. Okay. Now I look at what year we're at, and we're in year number 3 of the 7-year cycle, or we're in year number 4, or year number 5, or year number 6. There's a problem that I'm going to face. Problem is, if this guy does not repay me before the Shemitah year, something happens. It's canceled.
Communal.
Huh?
Then it goes to a communal loan, so that it does pay.
He doesn't have to pay me. That's all I'm concerned with right now. Okay?
But no.
Let's just leave it. I'm just talking about this Parsha said. He does not have to pay me. So now I lend you $100, right? And it's year 1, 2, 3, 4. I figure 2-3 years you'll pay me back. It's okay. It's no problem. So I do that. Now I'm getting to 6 years. I'm getting maybe at the end of the 7th year, I think is when it cancels, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's the end. So let's say it's the beginning of the 7th year. And so what happens? I don't want to lend you the money because I'm afraid you might not pay it back before it's due. So I won't give you the money. Right? Torah tells you no. Still lend the money because we're supposed to be people that have rachamim. What's rachamim?
Mercy, compassion.
That's what the Jew is supposed to do. If a guy's asking you, now, if a very wealthy guy comes to ask you for money and you don't feel like it, don't worry about it. But if the guy doesn't have what to eat and he really needs it, or he has an opportunity to get into a business and make a life for his own, then, you're going to say, well, he's going to be released from his debt, of whatever he borrowed in the last 7 years. So if you don't collect it before the Shemitah year, I think, then the that's canceled. That's it. And so that takes our Parsha into the next phase. We're already talking about tzedakah. The Torah tells us we have some obligations of charity, of tzedakah. And you should know that we are commanded to give charity, to give tzedakah to every poor person that asks you for it. You have to realize that. I have a guy that comes to synagogue every day and he puts his hand out. You don't think after 15 years, am I giving the guy $1 or $2 every day? I'm getting tired of this, If you can, you got to give it. You got to give it. Why? Because you have to thank God that you're in a position to be able to be a giver and not a taker. It's a terrible, terrible, hard thing to be a taker. People don't want to be that way. Now, sometimes that becomes what they do for a living. They get up every morning, they hit 5-6 synagogues, they make a few bucks for the day, and then they come back in the evening, they hit the synagogues again. And you look at them and you're going, what a life, what a guy. I bet you he's got money stuffed in his mattress. I bet you he's got everything that he wants, and he's probably got a 401k, and I don't have a 401k, but he's got one. If he's a poor guy and he's asking, we're supposed to give him. And there is loans, again, is the highest form of charity, but if you can't give him a loan to get him set up in business, give him. Now there's a question. If I have $100 that I've designated to give to charity, is it better to give $1 to 100 people, or one guy $100 and really let him have a chance to do something?
$1 to 100 people.
$1 to 100 people. First of all, it's you do the mitzvah 100 times. Second of all, you train yourself to give, and that's an amazing thing. So we're commanded to be merciful to our fellow Jews. And what's the reward that Torah is promising us for tzedakah, for charity? says if you give charity, the promise is that you'll never be the one having to put your hand out to receive it. If you're a giver, then please God, you'll always be a giver and never have to be a receiver. But I want you to know something. Torah law now. Even this guy who you're giving this $1 to every day, the guy who's really poor and he really needs it, guess what? He also has to give tzedakah. He also has to give. What are you talking about? This guy's making, $50 a day. How's he living on that? I don't know. But you know what? He's got to give his percentage of what he earns. He's got to give it to other people if they need it. Right? It doesn't stop. It never does. It never does. That's the cycle. It's this, you keep giving, and those that give. The question is then asked, who does the bigger mitzvah? The rich man who gives the guy the $1, or the poor man who takes the $1? You say, what a stupid question, Rabbi. What, are you wasting my time? But if you're a rich guy and there's no poor people around, how are you going to do the mitzvah? You need them. There needs to be poor people in order for you to do the Torah obligation right here. Starting to open up your mind a little bit? Okay. All right.
There will always be poor in that land.
There's always going to be.
Yes.
There's always going to be. There's always going to be.
Rabbi,
Yes, sir.
do you take questions during your shiur, or do you just want to go straight through?
I'm just doing the summary right now. Let me get to my main point, and then if you have questions then, would you mind? Of course. Okay. You ever hear the concept of a Eved Ivri? What's Ivri, first of all? Hebrew, right? Eved, what's an Eved?
A servant.
Slave, the servant, right? So, wait a minute, weren't we slaves in Egypt? Aren't we supposed to not have slaves? It isn't the whole idea of getting out of slavery, not to get back into slavery? But there's a concept of an Eved Ivri. Anyone know what that's about really quick?
Someone who falls into slavery under debt.
Or who chooses not to be the master.
That's coming up. The idea is like this. If someone gets involved in a situation where he owes money, he was caught stealing and they imposed a fine on him and he doesn't have it to pay back, or he was caught doing this or he's caught doing that, and he owes money, he doesn't have it. Instead of doing what we do, where you take a guy and you put him into prison, and then we spend about $300,000 a year per inmate over there, only to teach him how to become a better crook, because he'll learn from all the other crooks in prison, and he's there for a little stupid technicality. So the better system was, you owe money, work it off. A debtor's prison. You owe $5,000, so we'll find a guy who will buy your debt. He'll pay the $5,000 for you, and you will live with him, and he will show you what it's like to live in a Jewish Torah family, which means that you'll be treated right, you'll be fed right, and but you're still not a full free person. You're still an Eved, you're still a slave. So the Torah says, we like this idea to give you an opportunity to work it out if you get stuck in this situation. We want to give you this opportunity. However, what's going to happen is you want to get out of this situation, right? But we don't want you in this situation forever. So what happens? Shemitah comes. The Shemitah year. Oh, you bought an Eved Ivri? You bought that guy over there? And you didn't buy him. You paid off his debt, and the Beit Din assigned it to you. And not everybody can host an Eved Ivri. You have to be a special kind of guy. You have to know the rules. And so now comes the Shemitah year. You let him go. And not only do you let him go, but the Torah says you cannot send him away empty-handed. If you have grains and you have wine and you have all these other things, you have to give him from what you have. You've been blessed. And the Torah tells us, you remember what it was like to be a slave in the land of Egypt, don't you? Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, somebody was slaves in the land of Egypt, didn't feel good. Didn't feel good at all. So what we want to do is we want to send them away after the 6 years of service with many gifts. But a lot of times what happens, they get used to everything's provided for them. Yeah, they have to get up and work and do some chores around the house and maybe in the office or whatever their job is to do, but they don't want to leave. They like the master. He's very kind to them. And he's a religious guy, and he's keeping Shabbat, he's keeping kosher, he's always having simchas, and he's always having fun, and business is good. And you like the atmosphere, you learned a lot from him, and he's treated you right. And you don't want to leave. Torah says you should leave, but you don't want to leave. So what do? You know about this one?
Yeah, you have Peter
Sounds
chooses
good.
to put a hole in his ear.
Yeah, it's not just a hole in his ear; it could be a hole in her ear also. It also, Torah says, it applies to women that don't want to leave too. But you take their ear, you put something through it, a nail through it to the door, and it says, why the ear? Because this ear heard at Sinai that you should only be servants to God. But you want to be servant to a man? Fine, we're going to put a mark on you. So everybody who puts 50 or 60 little holes around their ears and stuff, just know what we're thinking all the time about you. Now, when you do that little mutilation of your ear over here, and they pound it to the door, and that's forever. Torah says that's forever, except that Torah doesn't mean forever. What does the Torah mean?
As long as you do.
It means until the Jubilee year, until the Yovel year. Remember, we have this cycle of 7 years. And then when you get to year 8, it resets, it's year 1 again. So that's the second cycle of 7. Then you get to year 8, no, it resets to year 1 again. Until you get to 49 years, it's the Shemitah year, the 49th year. Everything goes, like a regular Shemitah year. And then comes the Yovel year. Another year of Shemitah, the Jubilee year, except this time, he's gone. He can't stay any longer. So this slave, Eved Ivri, this Jewish guy who sold himself to pay his debts, so maybe he calculated, we're 44 years into this thing. Maybe I'm going to go in the year 50 anyways, right? I'm going to go in the year 49, 50. I'm going to be gone. So he can stay forever, but forever is only until the Jubilee year, the Yovel in Hebrew it's called. Okay? Then we're commanded, I'm still doing my long introduction. Then we're commanded to sanctify our firstborn animals. This is talking about the kosher type of animals that we can eat. Every firstborn animal is to be sanctified to God, and we're not allowed to use them for any type of labor. We can't put a muzzle on it, we can't work it, we can't put a plow on him, we can't ride it, we can't do anything with these things. We take these animals to Jerusalem, we sacrifice them, and we eat them there. And that's how we dedicate the firstborn of the animals to God. Do we do something like this with firstborn of Pidyon Ben, right? So you've been studying a lot. That's good. The only exception would be that I'm aware of if the animal has a physical defect, in which case it could not be sanctified on the altar in Jerusalem. So in that case, you can work him, you can eat it, you can do whatever you want with him, and that's that. And now, one topic that comes up now that you all must know inside and out, and that's called the Shalosh Regalim. Shalosh means 3, Regalim, regel, like with your feet, and this was the pilgrim festival where we would walk up to Jerusalem, and we're commanded in the Torah, every time there's one of the 3 pilgrim festivals, to make a journey up to Jerusalem. It's up because it's on a mountain, and to have simcha, to have happiness over there, to enjoy it. And so it starts with, what's the first of the,
Pesach.
you guys know your stuff, right? Pesach is the first one. So it talks about the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, the prohibition of eating chametz, the obligation and the commandment to eat matzah, on the first day of Pesach, the first night of Pesach. So that's when it starts with Pesach. And after Pesach begins, we don't go there yet. After Pesach begins, from the second night of Pesach, we start another commandment. What's it called? Omer. Say it louder. Say it like you mean it. Omer. We have to we have a command to count the Omer. Now, this is a biblical command, but the question is it biblical still today? And that's a little bit of an argument in the rabbis. Most of them say that it's rabbinical today because we don't have the temple. We're not doing this sacrifice anymore. So that's the way that goes. So it starts with Pesach, and then the obligation to bring the Omer and count the Omer. And then next, what's the next holiday after Pesach? And how many days after Pesach is Shavuot? It's the 50th day after Pesach. It's 49 days in between them, and we're counting the Omer at that time. And then the Torah goes on to talk about Sukkot. Okay. And we always have to be happy on these holidays, and we always have to be happy not only during Sukkot, which is called Chag, the moment we're supposed to be happy, but on Shavuot you have to be happy, and also on Pesach. I don't know how anyone's happy on Pesach after they have to clean their whole house and change everything. I don't know. And the Parsha concludes with a commandment that we have to go to the Beit HaMikdash on these 3 holy days and offer some gifts to Hashem. So that's an amazing thing over there. Okay, now I want to just give you a little idea. Remember I talked about how in the beginning of the Parsha there were blessings and curses, and God Almighty said you can have a choice. You can have blessings or you can have curses. Remember that? That's how that was 30 minutes ago I said that. Hopefully you still remember it, okay? All right. So here, some choices, they're easier than others, okay? What's your choice, chocolate or vanilla ice cream? Chocolate, that was an easy choice, right? Chocolate or vanilla? Vanilla. So it's a very easy choice, okay? Vacation in Maui or Bali? Bali. Any Mauis here? Okay, all right. Audi or Lexus? Okay, those are easy. Now, there's actually a term for those type of choices. It's actually a conflict that you have when you have to choose one or the other, and it's called an approach conflict. Either one you choose is good. It's just that you might want one more than the other. But you have a choice between 2 tremendously wonderful things. And I'm really thinking about some chocolate ice cream right now. Approach conflicts. You have a choice between 2 wonderful things. But now you got to know that neither choice is really going to hurt you all that much except for the weight that you gain. But now there's another type where you choose between 2 unpleasant things. And they call this one avoidance conflict. And I don't know how I know that. This is something that I knew years ago. What am I talking about? Okay, you can have root canal surgery, or you can have a colonoscopy. I'm not going to ask you which one you're going to choose. I don't want to know. If anyone said, forget it. But there's 2 unpleasant options. You get 30 days in jail, or you have to pay a $10,000 fine. So that's a tough one. $20,000 fine. Not so tough. $50,000, you take the 30 days, But if it's a $5,000 fine or 30 days in jail, you're thinking, Okay, let me give you another one. Lo alenu, should never happen to us. Someone's sentenced to death, and he has a choice: firing squad or hanging. Neither of them are pleasant, right? You don't want either of those things. So that's approach. No, that's avoidance. Approach is when you're happy with both choices. It doesn't hurt you. Both of these choices are bad. You don't want the root canal. You don't want the colonoscopy. You don't want the death by the firing squad. But then there's another group. And that's the one I want to talk to you about. And that's where you choose between something that's pleasant and something that's not pleasant or unpleasant, I guess is the term. That's called approach avoidance conflict. You have something that's good. That's the approach. Yeah, I want it. But then you have the avoidance. That's no good. I don't want that thing. For example, chocolate ice cream or your root canal surgery. What's it going to be? Is there anyone here who's going to go for the root canal? Really? None? No one? Okay. maybe not, maybe you don't like Maui so much, but Maui or a $25,000 fine. Take my, yeah, it's not that bad. Lexus or execution. Okay, I'll drive a Lexus. Okay. You'd be crazy to choose the unpleasant over the pleasant. And forgive me for driving this point home, but you're going to see what I mean in a second. Our Parasha Re'eh is the classic example of the approach avoidance conflict. The first pasuk, if you look in the Torah, Re'eh Anochi Noten Lifnechem Hayom, see, today, behold, right here today, I am giving you a choice. The approach avoidance. Beracha, blessing, right? We all want the blessing, right? Does anybody want the kilala? Does anybody want the curse? Anybody in their right mind want it?
No.
A blessing if you obey God's command and his mitzvot and his Torah. You get a blessing. God tells you right here in the Torah. If you believe in God and you believe that God gave us the Torah, it's a no-brainer, as Rabbi Block would say. There's nothing to talk about. It's right here. God's giving it to you. If you obey the commandments of God, your Lord, that he's giving you this day, then that is it. It's good. It's a blessing. And if not, then it's a curse on you. And the Torah says, what's going to happen, you're going to go into the land of Israel, and you're going to come into this valley, and you're going to see two mountains. And one is called Har Gerizim, and it's a beautiful, lush, green mountain. My wife and I climbed it about 50 pounds ago, and we climbed it when I don't know, we were first married or something, right? Or 7 months pregnant, we climbed it. Right next to it is Har Eval. Har Eval, it's barren, it's desolate, there's not a thing that grows on it, and that represents the curses. And God's telling us, you're going to come to these two mountains. Har Eval even sounds like evil, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound like evil? You know? Okay, so you have these two mountains, the green, lush one that grows, and it's right here. It represents blessing, and we're going to pronounce the blessings on that, and I want you to focus on that, God says. But there's this other option that you have, and that's the curse. Who's going to choose the curse? Any one of us? It's you're going to choose it.
Oh,
You want the root canal? I understand, maybe.
the ice cream looks like ice cream, but it might be diabetes and other things. Whereas the root canal looks like a root canal, but maybe it's,
So you made a very good point. You made a very good point. Okay, but imagine for a minute that you're an ancient Israelite, and it's not Rabbi Adatto who is talking to you, but it's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe is talking to you now, and he offers you blessings or curses, reward or punishment. Let's just leave it at that. The examples I gave were only to get your brains squeaking a little bit. Which are you going to choose? Which one? We'd opt for the one that brings satisfaction, the one that brings pleasure. That's what we're going to opt for. But while you would think that it's human nature to opt for the positive and to push off and get away from the negative, it's not always that way. Sometimes even when we strive for blessings, we somehow get drawn into the curses. Let me tell you why. Let me set the stage for you. You're standing between these two mountains. The blessing of Har Gerizim is right there, and Har Eval is there. And you would think everyone's going to go right for those happiness and blessings instead of the misery and instead of all the suffering and all the curses. But you know what? I ask any one of you what you want. You all say blessings, like we all said. Almost all of us said blessings. Blessings is what we meant. But have you known people who choose to self-destruct?
Yeah.
And in self-destructing, do they bring down those that are around them, especially the ones that they love, those that are closest to them? I can't tell you over the years how many people I've seen that have talent, that have brains, that completely ignore common sense. They just don't think anymore. What are you talking about? It's blessing. You're going to have a wonderful family. You're going to have a community. You're going to have tremendous, everything you've set your heart on and your heart desires. And then you have a mountain over here. It represents the evil, the curses. And somehow you're drawn to that. You ever see someone throw away their career? You ever see someone throw away a marriage for something as stupid as just not showing attention. You've seen it, right?
Yes.
Sometimes the guy says, well, she'll never know. I'll just have this one little affair. I won't hurt her. I don't mean to hurt her. I'll just do this. You destroy it. You're not thinking. You don't think. You don't know what's going to happen. It's going to happen. For sure it's going to happen. Everything's going to be. People, they are offered good jobs and good opportunities. And more often than you can imagine, they turn it down and it defies logic. Why would you do that? Who wouldn't choose blessings over curses?
Well, it's like immediacy and greed and dysfunction and all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. It's choosing success over failure. It's choosing joy over sadness. What do you always hear parents say when they have kids? All I want is for my kids to be happy. I want them to have success. I want them to have joy. I want them to achieve the goals that they want to do. But you know what? I read a story a couple years ago. I don't remember all the details. There was a rabbi who went to visit someone who was in the hospital. And there was a Jewish guy who went to visit him and just, wish him that he should be strong and be good. It's part of the rabbi's things that they do, And he goes into this guy's room and he sees a book on the nightstand by the Dalai Lama. And Rabbi looks at this guy and he says, you're a Jewish guy. What are you doing with a book by the Dalai Lama? And he says, well, look at the name of the book. It's called The Art of Happiness, a Handbook for Living. So Rabbi said, that's interesting. Tell me, summarize it. What does it say? And he says, I'll tell you what the book says. The book says that you can only find happiness in life if you're a compassionate person. That's what the whole book was summarized. Because if you're not a compassionate person, then you'll be cynical. And if you're cynical, you'll never find the good in people. You'll never find the good in anything. You'll never be happy. You're always going to be cynical. So that's what this book was about. Rabbi, what do you think about it? So the rabbi said, well, I am not considering, converting to Tibetan Buddhism, or I'm not suggesting that anyone else do it. The rabbi said, you know what, there's a lot of truth in that. If you can't find happiness, if you can't find, if you can't find satisfaction, then you're going to end up being cynical. And if you're cynical, you'll never trust other people. And if you never trust other people, you'll find out that it's very difficult to be happy. So it was just a nice idea that came from somewhere outside of Torah, but it's a Torah idea. The Torah tells you to always be happy. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with joy. Oh, wait a minute, didn't we just have Tisha B'Av where we had to, go into this mourning state? Yeah, you're right. You're right, except for how do you go into this state like we did during the 3 weeks and the 9 days and on Tisha B'Av, where these heightened levels of the mourning and decreasing our simcha? And that's the answer. We decrease the simcha that we have. We decrease the happiness that we have. You know what that means? That's what the Satmar Rebbe said. It means the Jew always has to be the simcha, even on Tisha B'Av. You just decrease the amount of simcha you have in your life, but you never give it up. The moment you give up your happiness, you're not a person anymore. You'll be a cynical, miserable blob. You'll be nothing. You'll be nothing. And so that's what's going on. Until probably a couple months ago, I would say, you could ask my wife, I was a news junkie. I was watching it every day, morning, noon, and night. And, it's like when you're a news junkie, it's very hard not to become cynical. And you can ask me, what country am I talking about? Choose a continent. You want to start right here at home? I can go on for an hour. You want to talk about Israel? No problem. You want to talk about Iran? No problem. You want to talk about Syria and Lebanon, and you want to talk about Cuba? Yeah, wherever you want to go. It makes you depressed when you watch all these things. So now we saw, and they're still happening, rockets coming in from Gaza being launched into Israel. There's still terror tunnels that are out there. And when Israel responds, what's the reaction of the world?
Attack.
Wow, what are you talking about? It was not proportionate. It was a disproportionate. Is that the right word? Help me out. Disproportionate response. What's that mean? That's another way of saying not enough Jews died. That's what a disproportional response means. That's what the world is saying when the Israeli government defends her people. Not enough Jews are dead, and there's people that are murdering Christians. Looking, around Iran. Look at in Iraq. Look at the ISIS that were murdering. Now, there's not so many of them anymore, but there's still groups out there. They're murdering thousands of Christians and the Yazidis, and they've been known to decapitate. And they post it. And in Europe, it's open season for anti-Semitism. And here in America, it's not that far behind. And the worst place to be is a college campus right now. The worst place to identify yourself as a Jew. You should do it. You should never give up and say you're not, but that's it. So I'm cynical, but I'm just telling you not to be cynical. So what am I, a fraud? Am I gonna have to pay you back? What's going on here? Sometimes you get bad news, and sometimes we're just overwhelmed with bad news, and it becomes very difficult to be positive during those times. But it is specifically during those times when the bad news and the difficult times come that you must look for the good. You must recognize the blessings in our lives. You have to ask yourselves, things are going to hell. You watch the news, you read the papers, you talk to people, you use your social media and see what's going on. And you have to ask yourself, what positives can we extract, can we learn from depressing news? I'll give you a few examples. Israel's being attacked right now. I mean, even last week there was more attacks, and but you have to say there's positive in there. You know what the positive is? Thank God they have that Iron Dome. Thank God that they have it, and thank God that it was largely in part that it got there because of America, the strong relationship that America had with them. Wait a minute. I'm finding positive in the cynical. I'm finding positive in the negative things. That's what I think the Parsha is telling us. We want blessings and we want success. And it's a no-brainer. Choose the blessings, choose success. Why am I wasting my time telling you, choose your favorite ice cream over having a root canal? Why am I wasting my time telling you these examples? Because we all want the good, but somehow we get lost and we get wrapped up in this cynical approach, and we don't see the positive, we don't see the good. And when that happens, the terrorists win. When that happens, the thugs win. I remember a few years ago, when ISIS was stronger, they were going after the Kurdish women, and they decided to take up arms, rather than be raped and be cut in half and then have it posted on YouTube. And they took up arms. And these Islamic fascist terrorists, they were petrified of being killed by a woman in battle, because to them it meant they weren't going to heaven. I'm going to tell you something being taped. They're not going to heaven. Don't worry about it. They're not going to heaven. But they thought if they were killed by a woman, for sure they're not going to heaven. Don't worry, you're not going anyways. They're not going to heaven. Killed by a man, killed by a kid, killed by a woman. But they thought it meant that they're not going to heaven. They're not going to get everything that was promised to them. So these women took up machine guns. They started defending themselves. You have to find the good in that. You have to find the beauty in that. I love it. I mean, and to see people defending themselves. And so that's an amazing thing. And this takes us right back to those two mountains, Har Gerizim and Har Eval, the beautiful good mountain and the bad one. They stood right between these two mountains, one representing the curses and one representing the blessings, and their heads were telling them, embrace the good one, take the blessing. You know that keeping the Torah and keeping the mitzvot, you know that it's good, but your head tells you sometimes, nobody's looking now, I'll sneak a little sub sandwich over here, I'll go out for an evening to the clubs. I'll do this, I'll do that. I'm not that Jewish yet. Don't worry about it. Can't do that. You can't do it because you're being distracted and you're not thinking clearly. And that's what this whole parasha is all about. It's a thinking people's parasha for a thinking nation. You think it's baby stuff? Blessing, curse, choose life, choose over death, choose blessings over curses. It's the most difficult thing in the world to do. This parasha was the classic example of approach, avoidance, conflict. Choose good over evil, choose blessings over curses. And that's what the mountains were doing. They were competing for our attention. And we become fixated on the terrible. And we become depressed and we become cynical and we're in constant misery, we're in constant anger. Or just change your mind and focus on the good things in life. Because you can be the master of your attitude. You can choose to feel blessed or you can choose to feel cursed. You can choose to stand on the good mountain, the Har Gerizim, the blessing mountain, the green, lush one, or you can walk over to the barren, brown, empty, dead, desolate mountain and have that life. It's your choice and you can choose whatever you want to. Okay?
It's almost as if Hashem is saying with Re'eh, see the good, look for the good.
Exactly. It's that's why the first word is Re'eh. It's not like it's not just like, hey, here is. It's you have to understand it. Re'eh. It's like when it tells you to hear in the Torah, it's telling you to understand. When it tells you to see, to really see with more than your eyes, see. You have to see, you have to feel it in your heart. Okay.
And then by saying you get the tikva, hope. Because if you don't have hope, then you have despair to be left.
Exactly. I don't mean to cut you off. I want to do a couple of these questions really quick. I know it's getting late. Michael, if you get a quick question, or is that an oxymoron?
Touche. How do you help a child to re'eh? If you know that they want the ball, and the ball is at the edge of a steep staircase, denying them, will hurt them. But allowing them will hurt them greater. So how do you teach them?
You have an answer to that yourself?
Re'eh.
Do you have an answer? How would you do it?
I'm asking the Rebbe.
Okay. So there's a few approaches that you have to do. One is you can't always worry about their feelings when their life is at risk. You, as a parent, you have to draw the line and you have to do whatever you can to protect your kid. But in terms of what I think you're really asking is how do you get them to see the difference between good and evil?
Yes.
And that's by what they see, by how you live. Many people, they feel that I put my child in a day school and I pay the $30,000 tuition bill for the kid. It's really, by the way, it costs that much. They give discounts, thankfully, if you need it, but if you don't need it, you pay it. Otherwise, they're going to come to me and they're going to come to other people and ask for it. So you put your kid there, you're paying your $30,000, and the kid's there, and he has a Rabbi, and he has a Mora, and she has this, and that's it. And you think you're done. And they come home, and I guarantee you, 20 years later, you're going to be coming to Rabbi Block's office saying, Rabbi, my son, who I raised in a Jewish school, I paid all this money, he went and he's not interested in being religious anymore. Come back and help him. And you know the stories of how that can end up. You've lived through that. A lot of you have lived those exact stories. So the answer is, you're 20 years too late to ask that question if you're asking it when your kid's 20 years old and he's already made up his mind. He's not interested in Shabbat. He's not interested in the Jewish things. He wants to go out and feel free and be on his own. You're 20 years too late. So what did you do wrong? You didn't live it to where he sees it, because kids are a lot smarter than you think. And if you're telling him to do something and you don't do it, they know it's a joke to you. They know it's a joke. I can go on longer about that. I have a lot to say about it, but I just wanted to, yeah. Huh?
Okay, a little more after that.
So there's, in yeshiva, they always start every year with one of three major gemaras. Bava Metzia, Bava Kama, Bava Batra. And this is very difficult, complicated almost dry legal halachic. The cow fell in the hole, and who dug the hole and who's responsible? Or your cow damaged my ox, or your ox damaged my fence. Who's responsible? And this is what they teach, right? You understand? So one time in the yeshiva of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was one of the greatest rabbis in North America for sure, if not in the world, he was getting older, and his kids took over the yeshiva. I mean, he's still there; he's the Rosh Yeshiva, but his kids are running the administration. And his kid decided, he was already, in his 50s, he decided, we're going to start learning the Gemara Berachot about blessings. About blessings. Let's teach the kids something practical that they can enjoy, that they can learn. How often do they learn? When do they see a cow falling in a hole? Or they oh yeah, well, your ox damaged my fence. Oh, well, maybe it's the same thing as you backed up into someone's car. Okay, but that's the kid. It's not exciting, it's a young kid. Let's learn Berachot. And Moshe Feinstein heard about it, and he called a meeting of the faculty, the entire faculty, and he said, I've never had an entire faculty meeting before, but I want to tell you one thing. There's a reason that the rabbis that came in the generations before us, for years and years and years, for 1,000 years, chose these particular Gemaras to teach the kids. There's a reason. The skills that they teach, the idea that you're within a legal community, it's important. It's not that the other Gemara that talked about blessings and prayers is not important. He says, you know what the first law in that Gemara is about prayer? That we pray Shachrit every morning at sunrise. And that's the law. If you can't do it the best way, you can get away with praying up to 3 hours later, 4 hours later. So if you can't get up and be at synagogue at 6 and put your tefillin on at 6, you can do it at 7, you can do it at 8, you can do it at 9. It's almost as good, but it's not the real way we're supposed to do it. The real way you're supposed to do it is at sunrise. And there's no question about it. That's the halacha. You get it? So the Moshe said, we're going to teach that. And the kids are going to go home. And even though their fathers go to synagogue and they put out tefillin every day and they're religious, we're talking about good families. The first thing they're going to see is that their fathers are not doing the halacha correctly. They're doing the, it's okay, you're legal. It's okay if you did it that way. It's good enough. That's not what we should teach our kids, Michael. We should teach our kids there's a right way to do it, even if it hurts. And they should see you get up at the right time and go to the right prayer. And if we're not doing it, don't start by teaching that Gemara till they're older, so they can understand, how hard it is to get up at 6 o'clock every morning. Yeah. No, I gotta be in synagogue at 6:15. What time do you wake me up? It's early. 5:30. It's early. Okay. It's already 9:30. What I want you to do then is I want you to take these questions. They all have chapter